How's everybody doing? Good? I need some energy after lunch. All right, don't fall asleep on me. All right, so when I first talked about doing this talk, I wanted to talk about the intersection and how design systems are for your entire organization. Because I'm building one at Honeycomb. It's called Lattice. And it's changed over time, so I hope you'll bear with me with this talk, because we're actually going to talk about monsters today. And specifically about how my design system nearly died because of monsters. So first I'm going to set the scene for you. It was a time of growth at Honeycomb. And many of you are probably familiar with this. You're in that time of growth. You have a customer base that's growing. There's a lot of adoption, and you're starting to get the ask for maturity, right? You're moving to enterprise. The sales team, the marketing team, they want a little bit more maturity in the output for product, in the output for marketing, and also in the overall look, the visual brand, the way product looks. So there was really a need for speed, how fast we could get things out, deliver, and experiment, and then get things fixed and put back out again. Or maybe not fixed, but improved, iterated. And then consistency. I know we talked about consistency earlier. We talked about it. And I totally agree with you. Sometimes consistency is not what you should be doing. But we had a lot of inconsistencies that were not good. And so that was something that we wanted to work on. So those are two things that a design system can deliver, right? Speed and consistency. And the observability space, which is where Honeycomb is, and I'm not going to tell you what Honeycomb does. It really is not relevant to this talk. But that space in itself was becoming more mature. There were more competitors coming, so we really had to step up our game. And so we rallied. We worked together with product. We worked together with marketing and sales and engineering, and we talked about what this design system could bring, and we got that buy-in. It really was surprisingly not hard. How many people have had a tough experience selling a design system and getting that buy-in? Yeah, some of you. I guess everyone else is just easy. Well, I've had some tough experiences selling it. In this case, there really was an understanding that, yes, this is going to get us what we need. Let's get together. Let's do this. So in the beginning, everything was amazing. Early success. Everything went great. We got a dedicated effort, green light. We were going to spend 2 quarters, design, engineering, and product all working together, making this thing happen. And this was the process that we laid out. We're going to start with a visual rebrand, which was necessary. We hadn't really looked at our brand in a while. It was feeling a little bit old, a little bit tired. There was a lot of teal. I don't want to go into it. If you like teal, that's fine. And then we're going to do an audit of what we had, kind of get a lay of the land, understand what was out there, start using that to define some guidelines, understand kind of where we were, where we needed to go, and use that to get a Figma library for ourselves. Figma. Because we didn't have anything to work together as a team. There wasn't anything there. We were doing everything piecemeal. And once we had that, we could establish our foundations and storybook, and then roll out updates and improvements, hopefully across UI. Everybody familiar with Storybook? Front-end components, React? Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm not saying things and you're like, what is she talking about? Okay, and that's what we use. We use React at Honeycomb, and we were using Storybook. So that was the game plan that we were going to use. And so we were talking to engineering the entire time, but a lot of the front-end work was really going to be in design, and the conversations with engineering was going to really be around whether those guidelines made sense, et cetera, and it wasn't until we got to the storybook and the rolling out of improvements in the UI that we're going to work real close together. So to give you kind of a little bit of an overview, this is the visual rebrand that we did. We really pumped up the colors. You can tell I like color. Our visual design team is amazing. They did a really good job here. Most of the work on this was just pumping up those colors, working specifically on the typography, improving that and improving the vertical rhythm and the spacing. We had a lot of issues there. We had a lot of early, what I would call developer art. Is everyone familiar with developer art? We're originally an engineering-led company, so we had engineers that were putting things together. There wasn't a designer there before me, and so we had a lot of that kind of stuff. And they were really excited and really open to see what we could do with the UI. So this was the rebrand that we did. And then this was the second part that we kind of went into, which was standing up our dedicated site. So we did our visual rebrand, and we worked together between visual designers and the product designers to talk about how to start bringing pieces of that personality and brand into the product. Because we kind of had that situation where you'd go to the marketing site and you'd be like, this is kind of cool, this seems like a fun company. And then you'd get into the product and it felt like an Excel spreadsheet. And you're like, it's kind of not what I expected. So we wanted to make sure that we were continuing that feeling, bringing that in. And then here we were putting together all of the principles, the guidelines, the components that we laid out into Zero Height. And I don't know how many here are familiar with Zero Height, but I absolutely fell in love with it. It's amazing. I'm used to the days where we had to work with developers for months and months just to build a static site and put everything in together. I was able to stand this up in a day. Including all of the visual stuff, all of our guidelines. I had already collected it. We had put it together as a team over the previous 6 months, but to actually get it in a site that I could share across the entire company took me a couple of hours. So again, this kind of helped support the idea that things were rolling, things were happening, it was successful, the stakeholders were excited, product was excited. We put it out at all hands on a demo day and everyone was happy. And this will show you a little bit of how they started to make their way into the UI. So we started by implementing some of these fundamental changes that we made using design tokens and changing some basic components, things like typography, color, spacing, for maximum impact. So things that would get consumed by other components, so you want to make sure to do those first, right? So typography is going to make its way through all your other components. Colors are going to be consumed by all other components. So we tackled those things first. And again, it has maximum impact for everybody. They can see a difference right away in the UI when all those colors are changed, when all of a sudden those spaces are changed. Believe it or not, the things on that before, those are inputs. And no shade to our team, we have some of the greatest engineers in the world working at Honeycomb. But it just wasn't as usable. We had icons that just weren't necessary. They weren't really adding anything to the UI. And so we did a lot of work on that side to make some changes and bring up the overall usability. I think this is a really good screen in terms of looking at the spacing and how much more we were able to get on the screen. Now remember, this is an engineering tool. This is for developers. So this is a tool that developers use to understand their system, understand what's happening with their services and how they're talking to one another. So they want as much information as possible. This is what they were seeing before with some typography and spacing changes. This is what they were able to see after. So a lot more information, a lot easier to make their way through. But this is where things got really gnarly. So we started finding what I like to call little monsters. The first one was I call it expired code, but our design systems guide, Zero Height, you can bring in Figma and you can bring in Storybook. So Figma gets imported, Zero Height imports the stories straight from Storybook, but you need a URL in order to do that. And our Storybook implementation was a little bit out of date. We hadn't kept up with it. We hadn't taken advantage of some of the latest things that you were able to do, including documentation. So this needed to be updated. So we needed engineers to spend time actually updating that. So that was a big roadblock, right? We had some expired code. And then when we actually got to the point of implementing those colors, that typography, all of those things, we ran into lots and lots of inconsistencies, and I'm talking about different inconsistencies. What I'm talking about here is we didn't actually have any components. We had bespoke things across, like here we were using hex, here we were using RGB, here we were using design tokens, and so it wasn't a one and done. It really was a matter of hunting and pecking and hunting and pecking and trying to find all those different things. And it became evident to us that we needed to stop and do a much broader inventory of the UI from an engineering perspective. We had done it from a design perspective, so we had done a lot of that work, but we hadn't looked and seen, okay, how are we building out our colors? How are we building out our typography? What's the best way to build it out? How do we want to structure it? How can we make it scalable and maintainable? So we needed a broader evaluation of what we had, where we needed to be, and what it was going to take to get there. So this screen's a little scary to me when I look at it now. That's me way back here. This is me right here. So this is me starting at Honeycomb all by myself. The goal was, this is in January of 20, I actually started in December, but I don't count it until January. And the goal was that I would build a design team. I feel like a superhero, right? I'm gonna come in and build a design team. And then we all know what happened during this time, right? Pandemic hit. But kudos to Honeycomb, they're amazing, and they're like, no, we believe in this, we're gonna make it through. You need a team, we're gonna do this. And so I was able to start building my team not too far in, about June. This is all the work that we had slated. You can see there wasn't quite a lot going on here, but we really got rolling towards the end of the year. That green line is Lattice. That is our design system, that's our dedicated effort. Everything else is all the other things that we had going on. And they are color-coded. Anything yellow is our marketing and design, that's our visual team, that's what they had to do. The blue is our product design team, that's what they had to do. And design ops is green. The only thing we had for design ops was Lattice. It was the only thing. It was the first thing that we had to stand up so that we could actually become a team and have something to work together on. And that's pretty much where it died. 7/21, that's where it died. And the reason why is because we had decided that at this point, we didn't have the front-end expertise on the engineering team to build what we needed. We had amazing engineers. We had unbelievable, world-class full-stack engineers. But they're not front-end engineers. So they didn't understand how to make something maintainable, something scalable. And not a lot of them were particularly interested in that. They were interested in other problems. And so we decided that it was time we hire some front-end engineers on the team. But that takes time. You gotta go hire, you gotta onboard, and so the entire Lattice project came to a halt. So this very real but invisible wall stood between us and any further progress. The front-end engineers were hired, but then we had to wait till they onboarded. And then once they were onboarded, all this roadmap initiatives kind of like sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Lattice was 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 6 months ago at this point. It hadn't lost support, but it lost steam, right? That dedicated effort was taken up by other things. So there just wasn't any room for Lattice anymore. And if you take a step back and look at it from the business perspective, we have a roadmap to deliver. We have things that we have said from the sales and marketing perspective, yes, we will deliver these things to you by the end of the year. Sales is counting on it. Marketing has been telling everybody that we're going to give you these things. Product is determined that this is what these teams are working on. Engineering is working towards it. There's not a lot of room to say, but we need Lattice. It's so important. Can we stop everything to work on Lattice? Especially when Lattice and design systems aren't immediately, the value is not immediate, right? You don't get that immediate gratification from a design system. You don't put out a new component and get that, your customers are going, yeah, I mean, your engineers are, your designers are, But your customers are like, where's that feature I've been waiting for 6 months? So it's really hard from a business perspective once these things stall, when you're talking with stakeholders, to get that buy-in to start it again. So it was decided that we would try to do it another way. We're going to work on it as we worked on features, right? So we have these roadmap initiatives. We have to add new query builder. We added metrics. So we have these things that we're doing. Maybe what we can do is we can update the components and make changes and build new components as part of the feature work, right? So you get like 2 for 1. Great. I wasn't very optimistic. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was like, oh, I don't think this is gonna work, because I know I just had like this sixth sense about what was gonna happen. And the little monsters came back for me. I knew they were coming. So the first little monster was deprioritization. I think you're all familiar with this. You get towards the end of a project, and you're like, dun, 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 and it's time to do the component, and they're like, we don't have time for that. We ran into this engineering issue, and we ran into this problem with this design, and we have to do this, and it doesn't have the in-the-moment impact. We'll iterate on it later. We just need to get this out and get feedback, and we'll do this later. So again, Lattice efforts, design system efforts, don't have that in-the-moment impact. They're, especially on mainly experimental features, if you're putting a whole new feature out, you want to get that out, get that feedback, and then get it back out again. You don't have time to worry about a design system. It just wasn't the right space for it. And when I say no collaboration, I am not pointing fingers at people by any stretch. There was no room for collaboration. If you've got a designer who's working on 3 different projects and an engineer who's working on 2 different projects, where's the space to talk about design systems? Where's the space to document something? You're lucky if you can get things through, never mind try to collaborate on these things. So there was just no space for that bigger conversation we all needed to have about how to make it scalable and maintainable, how to have these components go forward. We just lost that. But then almost the scariest monster to me, and he does look the friendliest, I will say, but he was the scariest, was this false optimism. And it kind of surprised me the most. Because we said that we were still going to work on Lattice and we were going to still do these components as we went, there was this idea from leadership, from the C-suite, that things were happening. Like, oh, we're still going to get our design system. We did forms, that's great. Well, yeah, we did one form, but it didn't actually make its way as part of a component. It didn't get rolled out. It's bespoke. It's the only one in the entire thing that has validation. Everything else, it pops up a banner. And oh, I didn't know that. Well, we know that because we're down there like doing the things. So it was a very disheartening thing. And we had reached an impasse. We needed Lattice to achieve our goals, right? So we're asked to deliver on these roadmap initiatives, to deliver something that's more consistent, that's more visually appealing, right? That aesthetic usability. But we can't stop everything to work on Lattice. We just can't. We have to continue doing the things that are on the roadmap, to the things that we promised we would deliver to our customers. And we can't make progress on Lattice without a devoted effort. So I had a conversation. I talked to the other R&D leaders, and it was decided that we simply could not move anything from the roadmap. And there was not a conversation where we were arguing whether it was worth it. It was more of a sad, almost a funeral, where we were all just like, we know this is important, and we know that this will get us further, but we just cannot do this right now. And that's sad. Sad times. All Lattice work stopped. That's it. For an entire quarter, we just simply dropped it. All the Lattice efforts stopped. We focused on other things. This is literally my head during this time. Because stopping work on Lattice, and it wasn't because I'm invested in design systems. Yes, I care about them. Yes, I've written about them. But design systems have a time and a place. And sometimes they work for you, and sometimes they're not. It's not the right time. This was absolutely the right time but not the right time. And I think that was the most frustrating thing for me. I saw all that it would deliver, and I saw all of these problems day to day that were happening that I could solve if we were able to get this design system off the ground, but I also knew that we just didn't have that space. And so I didn't know where to go. I mean, what do you do when, you've done everything you can, you've done everything possible, and it just isn't working? You just don't have the answers. So I slowly tried to find new ways to work on it. Just dropping it was something that felt alien and foreign and almost completely impossible to me. I don't know, as a leader, I think I felt like I have to find a way to do this, right? So I decided, what if we did this a different way? What if I made this an OKR? What if we said, if it's an OKR for engineering and for design, and we set up a weekly meeting, so we've got the collaboration, we're collaborating together. An OKR is something that you can't push off because it's technically like part of the roadmap, right? You've got your roadmap efforts, and then you have your OKRs. Those are important. Those are your objectives and key results. That it would be harder for those things to be deprioritized. It would be harder for that collaboration not to happen. We would be able to actually do that. And if we kept it very, very small and we worked on just one component, and we looked at and we picked banners. We're like, well, just look at banners, just banners. How hard could it be? Hey, we didn't pick buttons, okay? It could have been worse. How hard could it be? It didn't matter. And even though, so we socialized, we had these great meetings, the collaboration was fantastic, we talked about banners. Anybody who wants to talk to me about banners later, it was really interesting, the things that we found. It was super fascinating. I could do a whole talk on banners. But even though we socialized and everyone knew that this was an OKR and we were working on it and everyone was excited, as soon as the team saw that work come up on the Asana board, they were like, we have roadmap work. We can't do that. And it got deprioritized, just like before. It didn't matter that it was an OKR. It just didn't matter. And so, inevitably, it wasn't going to work. So I went to the R&D leaders again. And this time I was met with two very different reactions. And I think this is the point that I found most interesting. The VP of product was like, yay, we're slowly chipping away at it. And the VP of engineering was like, I'm so confused. I thought you said that we had to do this as a dedicated project, so why are we still trying to do this a little bit at a time? And I felt a lot of feels. One, I thought we were all on the same page. I thought it was very clear that I, as a leader, was trying to make things happen, that I wasn't giving up, that I was moving things through, that I was doing the best for my team, because at the team level, my team wanted this. They needed this. They needed this to do their day-to-day work. The engineers needed this to do their day-to-day work. They needed someone fighting for them on the front lines to get this done. And my VP of product was happy about it, thought it was great. So why was the engineering VP so upset, like confused? I almost thought, have I miscommunicated? So I went and I talked to my coach. I have a career coach. How many people here have a career coach? Oh, good. If you don't, I highly recommend one. I really do. And I talked about this with my career coach. And it was a real wake-up call for me. I was able to step outside of it and see it from a different perspective. This is my home team. As director, the VPs, those are my home team. That's who I talk to about strategy and moving forward. The team I manage is also my home team, but my first team are the VPs and deciding how we move forward. And what I had not kept in mind was that while I was communicating what I was trying to do, I was not listening to both parties, right? I was thinking we were all aligned, we were having these conversations, but I was not checking in and making sure that we were aligned. So even though my VP was happy, my VP of engineering was not. And what she saw was that there was this false sense of hope, and that there was this false sense that things were happening when they really weren't. And what she was hoping would happen was that we would stop and wait until we could actually get a dedicated effort. And in fact, what she was really hoping was that I would push more for that dedicated effort and not spend my time doing this little piecemeal. And I really needed that wake-up call. My coach asked me when I was talking in this conversation, she said, what would happen if you just went in and you said, I can't do this, that Lattice is dead? I quit. Not my job, I love my job, but I quit right now for Lattice. We have to put it away until we can do a dedicated effort. We're not gonna work on it. And I was like, it feels like a failure. Like, I feel like a failure. She's like, why is it your failure? I just didn't have an answer. And so thinking back on everything, you know, I think as managers and as leaders, sometimes we take on too much of ourselves, of what we're capable of. We're not superheroes. We can't do everything. And I was doing my team a disservice. You know, good intentions pave the road to hell, isn't that something? You know, in my good intentions, I was actually doing my team a disservice. And so I took that, I went back to my engineering VP, and I said, I want to hear everything that you feel about Lattice, and I'm just going to listen. We had a really good conversation. And then I went back to my VP of product, and I said, I can't do this anymore, and these are the reasons why. I'm not upset, I think that it's for the best if we wait. And this was a wake-up call, I think, for her as well. She's like, you know, that makes sense, and I respect that, and you know, I think we have to have a serious talk about getting this on the roadmap. Yep. So, it was very, very close, but Lattice is not dead. We all agree it's necessary to achieve the goals of the business. And so, as of 2023, it will be a dedicated effort. We've decided it's a boulder, it's a big effort. And we have an entire team put together with success metrics, and we know what we will be working on. So some takeaways, real quick. Communicate the good and the bad. I know that as leaders, we try to stay positive, especially on an effort that you've worked so hard to put together, but it's important to be explicit about what's not working and why. And I allowed this kind of false hope to live because I was thinking I was being a positive leader, but it wasn't helping the project move forward. Don't put energy into a design system without commitment and support, period. You will burn out. You will do it, you will absolutely burn out. And it's not a good example to set as a leader, and it sends mixed messages to leadership. And that's what I was doing. I was sending mixed messages. Lastly, roll with it and stay open. There are many different paths to get to where you want to go. When one closes, find another. I know it sounds so cliche, but it's so true. You have to just continue to look for the next path and be open. There's always going to be monsters in your way. How you handle them is what will make the difference for you and your team. So you can work for your monsters, or you can make your monsters work for you. Thank you.